Hello, welcome to Active Baking. In this video, I'll be showing you how to make my pumpkin bakewells. This is my second video now with pumpkin as my main ingredient. These are part of a series of videos that I'm going to do called season specials. So each season I'm going to pick an ingredient related to that season and then come up with some recipes that use that ingredient. This recipe is going to be separated into 5 parts to make it simpler. We're first going to start with the pumpkin seeds, which decorate the bakewells. We're then going to do the spiced pumpkin jam, then the frangipane, and then the shortcrust pastry. The final step is adding this all together to make the bakewells, and as an optional extra, you can also add marzipan to decorate the top. As part of my pumpkin videos, I made sure that I bought my pumpkins from a local farmer. I went to Broxbush's farm in Northumberland, and you can find the link to the video in my description. If you'd like to see more recipe videos incorporating pumpkin, then please make sure you subscribe to my channel. Let's get started. To make these spiced pumpkin seeds, you will need the following ingredients: half a cup of dried and rinsed pumpkin seeds, half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/8 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of vegetable oil, and 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Before you mix your ingredients, you will need to preheat your oven to 120 degrees Celsius and 100 degrees for a fan oven. Now we need to combine all our ingredients in a bowl. We'll start with our pumpkin seeds, add them to the bowl, and then we're going to add our vegetable oil, and then make sure that we stir it to combine. We'll then add our 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, and finally we're going to add our cinnamon and our salt. Make sure you stir that so that the pumpkin seeds are all evenly coated with the ingredients. Next, you need to put your pumpkin seeds onto a lined baking sheet and then spread them out so that they're in a nice, even, thin layer. Now you need to place the pumpkin seeds in the oven. You will need to cook them for 45 minutes, making sure you turn over once halfway through cooking. Now that the pumpkin seeds are cooked, we're going to remove them from the oven. To make our pumpkin jam, you will need 200 grams of pumpkin, 100 grams of caster sugar and 100 grams of jam sugar, and half a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ginger, and a teaspoon of mixed spice. We now need to chop our pumpkin for the jam. You can either chop this into big chunks or small chunks. It's completely up to you and how you like your jam. When making your jam, you do want to make sure that the chunks aren't too big, as these are going to be going in the bottom of a Bakewell tart, so you want it to be quite fine. Next, we need to cook our pumpkin with a little bit of hot water, so you need to scrape the pumpkin into the pan. Add a little bit of hot water. Put it on a low heat. Now that the pumpkin has been simmering for 10 minutes, we're going to drain the pumpkin and put it back in the pan. We can now begin adding the sugars. We then need to put this on a low heat, medium to low heat, and stir until the sugar has completely melted. Now that the sugar has completely combined, we can leave this to simmer for around 10 to 15 minutes. Now we need to add our spices. So if you just pour them in, and then make sure that you stir it in thoroughly. Now that we have added our spices, all you need to do is turn off the heat and remove the pan from the heat and allow to cool for about half an hour, and then you can put it in a bowl or container. For the Frangipane, you will need 60 grams of unsalted butter, 100 grams of ground almonds, 105 grams of granulated sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 2 eggs and 2 tablespoons of plain flour. The first two ingredients that you need to combine are your butter and sugar. And mix them with an electric whisk. Secondly, we need to mix in our 2 eggs, vanilla and ground almonds. Finally, we can add our 2 tablespoons of flour and mix. And now we have our Frangipane. You can now put this aside and leave until we put it all together at the end. To make the shortcrust pastry, you will need 450 grams of plain flour, a pinch of salt, 225 grams of unsalted butter, chilled, 75 grams of caster sugar and 1 egg yolk. You will now need to preheat your oven to 180 degrees Celsius for a conventional oven and 160 degrees Celsius for a fan oven. First part of making the pastry, you will need your hands, so make sure they are nice and clean. But you add the butter to the flour and then use your hands to rub it. So you need to pinch it and rub it until it resembles fine breadcrumbs. Next, we can add our sugar and salt and use a wooden spoon to mix this in until combined. Lastly, we can add our egg yolk and then mix until the dough starts clumping together. We can now use our hands to start pulling the mixture together into one ball of dough. If you find that your mixture is struggling to come together, then it can be worth adding just a tablespoon of water as well. We now have our ball of dough. So what we're going to do is wrap it in cling film. Once you've got it all together, flatten it a little into a disc and then put in the fridge to chill for around 30 minutes. Once the pastry is chilled, you are then going to unwrap it and roll it out onto a lightly floured surface. Make sure that this surface is clean and dry before flouring it so that there's no sticking. When rolling it out, you might want to lightly dust the top of the pastry and the rolling pin. We want to roll it out so that it is around 1/2 centimetre thick. Once you have rolled out your pastry, you will then want to have a pastry cutter. Make sure that you have a cupcake tin or muffin tin nearby. You want the pastry cutter to be just a bit thicker or wider than the edge of the circles there. We're then going to cut shapes out of our pastry, place them into our cupcake tin. You want to put gentle pressure to ease it in to the tin. Once you have used all of the pastry that you can then pull it all together into a clump, roll it out again and use the remaining pastry. Once you have cut out all your shapes into the tray, you'll then need to blind bake them. This involves having small cut squares or rectangles of baking paper and baking beans. You then need to put each little square of baking paper inside and just gently push it in. You don't want it to be hard, you want it to rip the pastry. Add a few of the baking beans, enough until filled. And do this for every single one of your little tarts. Once you have filled all your pastry cases, you can now put this in the oven for 10 minutes to blind bake. After the 10 minutes, remove them from the oven, take out the baking paper and the baking beans and put back in the oven for a further 10 minutes. Now I have removed my tarts from the oven, what I now need to do is put it all together. So here you will need your pumpkin jam and your frangipane. You'll need a small spoon, and what we're going to do is ever so gently just put a small spoonful of the jam in first. Now that we have added jam to the base of all our tarts, we can now add a spoonful of frangipane. Once you've finished filling your tarts, you can then put them back in the oven for a further 15 minutes until the frangipane has started to brown on top. To decorate the Bakewells, you can use marzipan. However, this is optional, you can have it on if you want. I have got some white marzipan, which I've then added food colouring to. So I have orange food colouring, black and green, and this is so that I can make little pumpkin shapes to put on top. Once the Bakewells are cooked, you can now remove them from the oven and place them on a wire rack or somewhere for them to cool. Once the Bakewells have cooled, you can then add your marzipan decorations. As you can see, I've moulded mine into little pumpkins. And then finally, you can sprinkle on some of our seeds that we made before. Thank you for watching my pumpkin Bakewells recipe video. If you would like the full recipe, I've included a link in the description. This is to my blog where I will be posting written up versions of all of my recipes. If you like this recipe today and you'd like to see more like it in the future, or want to know what I'm getting up to with my baking in general, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram @ActiveBaking. If you enjoyed this recipe and you'd like to let me know how you got on, please make sure you like this video and comment down below. Thank you again for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye.